The prince's son was blind, until the new nanny removed something from his eyes no one could imagine. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Isla Cameron arrived at Dunmore Castle with the hesitant steps of someone who feared being sent back, before even crossing the threshold. The stone walls rose before her like a silent judgment, tall and forbidding against the pale Scottish morning. She kept her hands clasped around the small satchel carrying her few belongings, hoping no one noticed how tightly she held it. A footman opened the door without expression, nodding for her to enter. She obeyed, breath catching as the castle swallowed her into its cool corridors. A maid hurried toward her. "You're the new nanny," she said, not quite welcoming, not quite unkind. "Follow me. They're expecting you." Isla followed, trying to look confident, though her heart pounded. She had never imagined being summoned to the household of Prince Alistair MacGregor, much less to care for his son. Word of the child's blindness had reached even the smallest cottages, always spoken with sombre uncertainty. Physicians from Edinburgh and beyond had come, tested, treated, and failed. People said the prince had grown colder each year, as if hope itself had abandoned him. The maid led Isla through a corridor lined with tall windows. The castle felt too quiet, as if sound itself walked cautiously here. Isla inhaled and whispered to herself, "Just be gentle, just be kind." It was all she had to offer. They stopped near a heavy wooden door. "Wait here," the maid said. She knocked softly and stepped inside. A moment later, she reappeared. "He'll see you." Isla swallowed hard and entered. Prince Alistair stood near the fireplace, tall, composed, and wearing an expression of controlled fatigue. He didn't turn immediately, as if gathering his thoughts before facing her. When he did, Isla curtsied quickly, praying she didn't look as nervous as she felt. "You are Isla Cameron," he said. "Yes, Your Highness." His gaze traveled over her modest dress, her neatly braided hair, the satchel she guarded with both hands. His voice sounded as though the words required effort. "You were recommended by Father Brennan. He says you have a gentle manner with children." "I try my best, sir." "That is all anyone can ask." He paused, studying her as though measuring her sincerity. "You understand the circumstances. I was told only that the little prince requires patient care." Alistair's jaw tightened. "He requires more than that, Miss Cameron. Ewan has known nothing but darkness since birth. Every treatment has brought him discomfort or false expectation. I will not allow more disappointment." His words carried an edge that pricked Isla's nerves, but she lifted her chin slightly. "I don't intend to give him false hope, Your Highness. Only comfort." He inclined his head, accepting that. "Very well. You will meet him now. He is lively, and curious, and lonely." For a moment, something unguarded softened his eyes, but it disappeared as he opened the door, leading to another corridor. "Follow me." They walked in silence until they reached the child's chamber. Alistair knocked gently, though it was his own son within. "Ewan, lad, may we come in?" A cheerful voice answered, "Yes, Papa." The door opened, revealing a small room with a simple bed and shelves filled with carved animals. A boy of 6 sat on the rug, turning a wooden bird slowly in his hands, feeling its wings with delicate curiosity. His hair was dark like his father's, but his eyes, though clouded, glowed with life. Alistair announced softly, "This is Miss Cameron. She'll be your new nanny." Ewan tilted his head toward the sound of Isla's footsteps. "She walks lightly," he said with amusement. "Are you small like a bird?" Isla felt a quick burst of affection. "Perhaps smaller than some birds, but bigger than others." Ewan laughed. "I like her." Alistair exhaled as if relieved. "Isla will spend time with you today. I'll return shortly." Once the prince left, Isla knelt beside the boy. "May I sit with you?" she asked. "Yes, please. Tell me what colors you think your dress would be if you could choose." Isla smiled. "Maybe blue, but I'm not sure it would suit me." "It sounds kind," he said, touching her sleeve. "You sound kind." His innocence settled warmly in her chest. She reached for a cloth from her satchel. "May I clean your eyes a little, Ewan? It won't hurt, I promise." "Is it the same washing the other nannies tried?" "It's just warm water with a little herb. It's gentle." He nodded and lifted his chin bravely. Isla dipped the cloth, wrung it carefully, and brushed it along his closed eyelids. He relaxed at first, but when she moved closer to the inner corner, he flinched ever so slightly. She drew her hand back. Did it hurt? He shook his head. It feels strange. Strange how? Like something is there that shouldn't be, he said simply. Isla hesitated, then leaned closer and parted his eyelid with the softest pressure. She froze. Beneath the lid, near the corner of the eye, she felt a small hard point. It wasn't grit or dried residue. It was something firmer, something foreign. She withdrew quickly, heart pounding. Ewan, did anyone ever tell you that something was in your eye? No, he said, but it's always felt prickly sometimes, like a grain of sand that stays forever. Isla stared at him, her breath shallow. How could doctors, renowned physicians, have missed something like this? It was so small, but undeniable. She touched it again gently, just to be certain. The same firm speck. Cold, unnatural. Her mind raced. She must tell someone. But who would believe her? She was only a village girl hired in haste. The castle held a hierarchy she barely understood, yet she couldn't pretend she hadn't felt it. Ewan tilted his head. Did you find something? I think so, she answered softly, but I need to be careful. I don't want to hurt you. You won't, he said with childlike certainty. Isla touched his cheek, steadying herself. She wanted to remove the object, whatever it was, but her hesitation grew. If she was wrong, she could harm him. If she was right, someone should know, someone who could help properly. Before she could decide, the door opened and Prince Alistair re-entered. He paused at the sight of Isla kneeling so close to Ewan, her expression tense. Is everything well? He asked. Isla quickly composed herself. Yes, Your Highness. He's very brave. Ewan clapped his hands. Papa, she tells good stories and she's gentle. Alistair's features softened slightly. I am glad to hear it. Isla stood, unsure whether to speak of her discovery. Her voice felt trapped behind uncertainty. If she mentioned it now, what if he dismissed her? Worse, what if he accused her of imagining things? She had been in the castle less than an hour. She had no right to question years of medical examinations. Alistair studied her closely. You seem troubled. I'm only trying to learn his needs, sir. He nodded slowly. You'll grow accustomed to them in time. But Isla wasn't so sure. As the morning passed, she stayed with Ewan, helping him trace shapes carved in wood, describing each one softly. The boy's laughter echoed gently against the chamber walls, a sound rarely heard, as one maid whispered in passing. Isla tried to focus on the joy she brought him, yet her mind kept returning to the small, cold point beneath his eyelid. During midday, she walked through the corridor to fetch fresh water. Two maids whispered as she passed. She'll last no longer than the others, one murmured. They always think they can fix what cannot be fixed. Poor thing, the other replied. She looks hopeful, that never ends well. Isla kept her gaze lowered. Hopeful, yes. Foolishly hopeful. When she returned to Ewan's room, he greeted her as if she had been gone for hours. Did you bring more stories? I did, she said, sitting beside him again. They spent the afternoon in bright conversation, but once, as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her hand brushed his eye again, and she felt the same hard speck beneath the lid. Her breath caught. It was real. It hadn't been imagination. It hadn't vanished. She had to tell someone, but she couldn't tell just anyone. By late afternoon, Prince Alistair appeared at the door once more. Miss Cameron, he said, a moment, please. Isla rose, smoothing her dress, following him into the corridor. The air felt colder here. I've received word from the senior nurse, he said. She tells me you examined the boy's eyes. Isla felt heat flood her cheeks. Only gently, sir. To clean them. She said you appeared concerned. Isla swallowed. I didn't mean to cause alarm. Alistair's gaze sharpened. Did you find something? Isla hesitated, then spoke the truth carefully. I felt something unusual, very small, hard. I don't know what it is, but it's there. He stared at her, unreadable. A long moment passed. She feared she had overstepped, feared she had already ruined her chance before the day even ended. His silence pressed heavily on her. At last he said, Show me tomorrow morning, just the two of us. Her breath caught. Yes, Your Highness. He nodded once, then walked away without another word. Isla stood alone in the corridor, heart thundering. wondering what exactly she had touched inside the child's eye, and why no one else had ever noticed it. Isla barely slept that night. Her small chamber felt too large, too quiet, too full of possibilities she could neither name nor silence. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Ewan's trusting face and felt again the strange, tiny speck hiding beneath his eyelid. Dawn arrived slowly, with pale light stretching across the stone floor, and Isla rose before anyone knocked at her door. By the time she reached Ewan's chamber, Prince Alistair was already there. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, posture rigid with expectation. Ewan sat on the edge of his bed, swinging his feet impatiently. "You're early," the prince said, his tone steady, but his eyes tense. "I couldn't sleep," Isla admitted. "Nor could I," he replied quietly. Ewan brightened at the sound of her. "Isla, Papa says you're going to look at my eyes again." "Yes, just gently," Isla said. "Is that all right?" He nodded eagerly. "Maybe today you'll tell me what color the sun looks." Alistair's expression softened for a brief second. "Let us begin," he said. Isla knelt before Ewan, her hands steady despite her racing heartbeat. She held the same warm cloth as the day before, though now her every movement felt watched, evaluated. She explained each step, and Ewan remained perfectly still. She brushed the cloth along his eyelid, then carefully lifted it again. The tiny, firm speck was unmistakable. Isla inhaled sharply. "I feel it," she whispered. Alistair moved closer. "Where?" "Here," she said, guiding his hand lightly. "At the inner corner." The prince leaned in, his breath held. Ewan waited patiently, trusting them both without question. Isla felt the pressure of responsibility like a physical weight. After a moment, Alistair stepped back, uncertainty flickering across his features. "You're certain?" "Yes," Isla said. "It is not part of him. It shouldn't be there." Ewan asked, "Is it hurting me?" "No, sweetheart," Isla said. "It just shouldn't be there. That's all." Alistair looked at Isla again, searching her face. She sensed he wanted to believe her, yet fought with every lesson he had learned from years of false diagnoses. But he nodded slowly. "I will call the senior nurse," he said. Isla hesitated, but said nothing. It was his right. A maid was sent, and moments later the senior nurse arrived, her expression tight with barely concealed irritation. She glanced at Isla with a cold edge before turning to the prince. "You wish to see me, Your Highness?" "Yes," Alistair said. "Miss Cameron believes she has found something beneath my son's eyelid." The nurse's brows rose, not in surprise but in annoyance. "With respect, Your Highness, the child has been examined dozens of times. Nothing abnormal has ever been found." "I would like you to look," Alistair insisted. The nurse forced a smile. "Very well." Isla stepped aside but stayed close as the nurse lifted Ewan's eyelid. She pressed rather firmly, too firmly in Isla's view. Ewan winced, and Isla flinched with him. "There is nothing," the nurse said. "As I expected." "That is not possible," Isla said softly, unable to stop herself. The nurse's gaze snapped toward her. "Miss Cameron, with your background, you may not understand what you think you felt. The child's eyes have been examined by men with decades of medical expertise." Alistair watched between them, jaw tight. "I know what I felt," Isla said, trying to keep her tone respectful. "It is small, but real." The nurse folded her arms. "Your Highness, you must not allow every new caretaker to imagine ghosts. It creates confusion for the boy." Ewan lowered his head as though sensing the tension. Isla felt heat rising in her face, not from anger but humiliation. She wished the nurse hadn't spoken of her background in such a patronizing way. She wished Alistair would say something. Instead, silence stretched. At last the prince nodded. "Thank you," he said to the nurse. "You may go for now." The nurse curtsied and left, satisfied. Isla's throat tightened. She whispered, "I'm sorry, sir. Perhaps I misinterpreted it." Alistair studied her carefully. "Did you misinterpret it?" "I don't think so," she said, voice quiet. His eyes held hers, and for a moment she felt he believed her more than he believed the nurse. But he said nothing. Instead, he turned to Ewan. "Do you feel something in your eye, my boy?" "Sometimes," Ewan replied. "Like a tiny pebble." Alistair's expression flickered. "Since when?" "Always," Ewan said, shrugging lightly. That single word seemed to hit the prince harder than any accusation. He dismissed Isla gently, saying he needed a moment with his son. She curtsied and stepped out, though embarrassment clung to her like damp air. She walked down the corridor, head lowered, trying not to imagine the whispers that would soon follow. Two maids turned the corner and nearly walked into her. "Oh," one said. "It's the new nanny, the one who thinks she found something miraculous," the other murmured, not quietly enough. Isla pretended she hadn't heard. She forced herself to continue forward. She reached a small alcove near the staircase and paused, breathing deeply. She pressed her hands together, ashamed at how shaken she felt. She had overstepped. She had acted foolishly. She had embarrassed herself before the prince and half the staff. A familiar voice approached behind her. "Miss Cameron," she turned. Prince Alistair stood only a few steps away. "Your Highness," she said quickly. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to contradict the nurse. I didn't call you back to reprimand you," he said. She blinked once, surprised. Alistair looked weary, but his voice was calm. "Ewan tells me he has felt something in that eye since he was very small." "I believe him," Isla said. "I believe him as well," Alistair replied. She stared at him, unsure she had heard correctly. He stepped closer. "I would like you to continue caring for him exactly as you did yesterday. Gently, patiently, and if you feel that object again, you will tell me." "Immediately!" Hope fluttered faintly in Isla's chest. "Of course, sir." Alistair exhaled. "Good. I trust your sincerity. And your caution." Her breath caught. "Thank you, Your Highness." He nodded once, then added more quietly, "Ewan likes you. That matters more than most things." Before she could answer, he turned and walked away. The rest of the day, Isla stayed with Ewan, determined to show she deserved the small trust Alistair had shown her. She told the boy stories from her village, stories about animals and fishermen, and the strange old woman who insisted the wind spoke to her. Ewan listened with delight, laughing so hard he fell sideways on the rug more than once. Servants passing by paused at the sound. Isla sensed surprise in their expressions. Perhaps they had forgotten what a child's laughter sounded like. Ewan asked question after question. "Do birds ever get lost? Why do wolves howl at night? Would you still be my nanny if I could see?" Isla answered each one with care. "I would if I were allowed," she said. "Papa would allow it," Ewan said confidently. "He likes you." Isla wasn't certain that was true, but hearing it warmed her nonetheless. When evening came, Isla prepared Ewan for bed. She sat beside him while he rested his head on the pillow. "Will you wash my eyes again tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "If you like." "I like," he murmured sleepily. She stayed until his breathing steadied, then quietly left his room. As she closed the door behind her, she found herself face to face with the senior nurse. The nurse's expression was hard. "Miss Cameron, a word." Isla stepped aside, allowing space for the older woman to speak. "You will not interfere with the boy's condition again," the nurse said. "You are here to comfort him, nothing more. Do not forget that." "I only mean to help him," Isla replied. "Your help is not needed," the nurse said sharply. "Do not confuse kindness with expertise, and do not give the prince false hope." Isla swallowed. "I don't intend to." The nurse's eyes narrowed. "Then keep your place." She walked away, leaving a trail of cold silence behind her. Isla stood still, heart heavy. She wanted to defend herself, but knew it would only make matters worse. She returned to her chamber, sat on the edge of her bed and tried to steady her thoughts. She had come here to care for a child, not to unravel mysteries or challenge authority. Yet every instinct within her told her the object she felt was real. It wasn't something that belonged in a child's eye, and if it had been there for so long without being discovered, something was deeply wrong. A soft knock startled her. She opened the door. Ewan stood there barefoot, holding his wooden bird. "Isla," he whispered, "why did everyone sound upset today?" Her heart ached. "Grown-ups worry too much, that's all. Are you worried?" She knelt and brushed his hair back gently. "Only about you being awake so late." He giggled. "I couldn't sleep." "Come," she said softly, guiding him back to his room. "I'll sit with you until you do." Once he was settled again, Isla hummed an old village tune, one her mother used to sing. Ewan relaxed instantly. "Isla," he whispered halfway to sleep, "don't go away." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. When he finally slept, Isla slipped out, closing the door quietly. As she turned to leave, she saw Prince Alistair standing at the end of the corridor. He hadn't announced his presence. He had simply been there watching quietly. "How long were you there?" Isla asked softly. "Long enough," he said. "You have a rare gift with him." She lowered her gaze. "I only try to be kind." "Kindness is rare in places like this," he said. Isla's breath trembled slightly. Alistair stepped closer. "Tomorrow," he said, "you and I will examine his eye together, without interference." She nodded. Alistair paused as if weighing his next words. "Whatever you felt, I want to understand it," Isla whispered. "So do I." He held her gaze for a long moment, then walked away. She stood alone, pulse unsteady, wondering where the truth would lead them. The next morning, as she reached for the cloth and stepped toward Ewan with Alistair at her side, Ikla's fingers brushed the boy's eyelid, and again she felt the tiny, unyielding speck. Prince Alistair stood so close beside Isla that she could hear the faint shift of his breath as she touched Ewan's eyelid again. The quiet morning light stretched across the room, but none of them seemed to notice it. The world had shrunk to a boy's still face, and the nearly imperceptible speck Isla had felt twice before. She lifted the lid gently, her fingers steady, though her pulse beat too fast. "There," she whispered. "Do you feel that, Your Highness?" Alistair leaned in, his brow furrowed. Ewan sat patiently, hands folded in his lap, trusting her completely. Isla guided the prince's fingertip with delicate precision. He hesitated, then touched exactly where she indicated. His breath caught. "You felt it," Isla murmured. Alistair didn't answer immediately. His jaw tensed, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Yes, something is there." Ewan tilted his head. "Is it supposed to be there, Papa?" Alistair straightened slowly, as though fighting the impulse to react too strongly. "No, my boy, it is not." Ewan seemed unbothered. "It never hurt much, only a little." Alistair's eyes flickered with pain. "You should never have felt it at all." Isla stepped back, folding the cloth in her hands. "I don't know what it is, Your Highness, but it's not natural." He studied her with renewed seriousness. Isla could almost feel the shift in him, as if the doubt that had shadowed him for years had suddenly thinned. Alistair said, "Follow me." He took no time to explain. Isla blinked, startled. "Now?" "Yes. Bring the cloth." She obeyed instantly, hurrying behind him through a side door that led to a narrow stair. Ewan's voice called out, "Will you come back soon?" "We will return shortly," Alistair promised. Isla added softly, "I'll tell you a story when I return." Ewan seemed satisfied and lay back on his pillows. Alistair guided Isla through a quiet passage toward the library. When the door closed behind them, he faced her with a gravity that made her chest tighten. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and you must answer honestly." "I will." "When you first examined Ewan, did you immediately think something had been overlooked by the physicians?" Isla hesitated only a moment. "Yes." "Why didn't you say that the moment you met me?" "Because," she said, lowering her eyes briefly, "I thought you would dismiss me." Alistair exhaled sharply, not in anger but in painful recognition. "I might have. And that is the trouble." Isla lifted her gaze. "I wasn't trying to go beyond my place." "You acted with care," he said, "and integrity. Those things do not go unnoticed." A silence stretched briefly, filled only by the dull sound of logs settling in the fireplace. Alistair walked toward an old chest near the shelves and opened it. Inside were medical reports tied with faded string. He set them on a table. "These are every record concerning Ewan's early examinations," he said. "I want you to look at them." Isla's eyes widened. "Your Highness, I am not qualified to—" "I do not expect you to judge the medical content," he said firmly. "I want you to tell me if anything stands out to you, something that a trained physician may have overlooked, simply because they were not looking for it." Isla swallowed. "If that is what you wish," he nodded. "Begin anywhere." She untied the first bundle, her fingers trembling slightly. She read in silence while Alistair stood at the edge of the table, watching her with an intensity that felt strangely protective. The papers were filled with notes, measurements, and clinical terms she barely understood. But something seemed odd. "This one," she said. "It says that the physician examined his eyelids, but it doesn't say he lifted them." Alistair leaned closer. "Explain." "He wrote about the outer structure only, Not inside the lid. That seems incomplete. Alistair frowned. The same physician visited several times. Why did he never check more thoroughly? Isla flipped through the pages, her nerves heightening. Here again, only surface notes. Alistair's expression darkened. His name appears too often. Could it be an oversight? Isla asked cautiously. Not from a man of his reputation, Alistair replied. He was meticulous, almost excessively so. They exchanged a tense look. A knock at the library door startled them both. Enter, Alistair said. The senior nurse stepped inside, her expression composed but her eyes sharp. Your Highness, I heard you wished to review the boy's medical history. Alistair stiffened, a hint of irritation flickering across his features. We are reviewing it. With Miss Cameron? The nurse asked in a tone too polite to be genuine. Yes, Alistair said flatly. The nurse's eyes shifted toward Isla, full of quiet disapproval. Your Highness, I must caution you. Miss Cameron has only just arrived. She has no familiarity with the boy's condition beyond basic caretaking. Isla bit the inside of her cheek, staying silent. Alistair turned to the nurse. Are you suggesting that I cannot speak privately with my son's caretaker? Not at all, Your Highness. Only that it may be unwise to allow her to influence your understanding of a complex medical issue. She has influenced nothing, Alistair replied. She simply observed what she felt. Something you denied was present. The nurse's jaw tightened. Your Highness, that will be all, Alistair said firmly. The nurse looked at Isla with a cool, lingering glare before stepping out. The door closed with a soft but pointed click. Isla whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cause trouble. You didn't, Alistair said. The trouble existed long before you stepped into this castle. He gathered the papers back into the chest and secured the lid. I must speak with the archivist. There are records missing. Missing? Isla repeated. Yes, pages concerning my wife's final months. They were here once, I would have sworn it. The tension in his eyes deepened, though he tried to hide it. Isla asked softly, Do you think this has something to do with Ewan? I do not know, he said. But the timing is troubling. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. And the object in Ewan's eye, it cannot be ignored. I want you to continue caring for him, exactly as you did yesterday. And if the nurse gives you difficulty again, you will tell me. Your Highness, Isla said quietly. She worries that I will overstep. She fears losing her influence, Alistair replied. It is not the same. Isla blinked, startled by the frankness in his tone. Before she could speak, a small knock sounded at the door. It opened slightly, and Ewan's voice drifted in. Papa, Isla, are you still talking? Alistair's tension faded into gentle affection. Come in, lad. Ewan entered, guided by instinct as much as familiarity. I thought you left without saying goodbye. We would never do that, Isla said warmly. Ewan turned toward her voice, smiling. Can you tell me one of your stories now? Isla looked to Alistair for permission. He nodded. Of course, she said. They returned to Ewan's chamber. Isla sat beside him, telling him about a fisherman who could predict storms by listening to the sea. Ewan laughed at all the right moments, leaning against her arm with unwavering trust. Alistair stood nearby, arms folded, observing them with a quiet expression Isla couldn't quite read. Gratitude, perhaps, and something else, softer and unspoken. When the story ended, Ewan yawned and curled up on the bed. Isla brushed a hand through his hair as he drifted to sleep. She rose quietly and moved toward the door, but Alistair stopped her with a single murmur of her name. Miss Cameron. She turned. Yes, sir? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You were right to question what you felt, and you were brave to speak despite the doubt around you. I only want what is best for him, she said. As do I, Alistair replied. Their eyes held briefly, without tension this time, only shared determination. He gestured toward the corridor. Walk with me for a moment. She followed him into the hallway. The air felt cooler here, and their footsteps echoed softly. Alistair faced her again. If this object is something the physicians overlooked, we must proceed carefully. But if it was placed there... He stopped himself. Isla felt a chill. Placed there? I'm saying nothing yet, he said slowly. We need more certainty before making assumptions. She nodded. What would you have me do? Continue exactly as you have. And tomorrow morning, I want you to try removing it." Isla inhaled sharply. "Me? You are the only one who has sensed it with such clarity," Alistair said. "And Ewan trusts you." She stared at him, overwhelmed by the responsibility. "If I hurt him—" "You won't," Alistair said. "You are careful, and I will be beside you." Isla felt the depth of his sincerity. It steadied her. "I will do my best," she whispered. "That is all I ask." They returned to Ewan's chamber one last time to check on him. The boy slept peacefully, unaware of the weight settling around his small world. Isla turned to leave but paused at the doorway, looking back at Ewan with quiet worry. Alistair noticed. "We will find answers," he said. She nodded faintly, holding on to that promise. But as she stepped into the hallway, she caught sight of the senior nurse at the far end, watching her with an unreadable expression. Cold, assessing, almost warning. And in the nurse's eyes, Isla sensed something she had not seen before: fear. Prince Alistair arrived at Ewan's chamber before dawn, as promised. The castle was still half asleep, the corridors quiet except for the faint creak of old wood. Isla stood at the bedside already, her hands folded neatly before her, her breath shallow with anticipation. She had not slept well. The weight of what she was about to attempt pressed heavily against her ribs, but she forced her nerves to still when Ewan stirred. The boy blinked slowly, then smiled. "Is it morning already?" "Yes," Isla said softly. "And we're here with you." Alistair stepped forward, setting a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Ewan, lad, Isla will look at your eye again, but this time I will be here with you the whole while." Ewan nodded without hesitation. "That's all right, Papa. Isla's hand is soft." Isla swallowed, touched by his trust. "I'll be very gentle. If anything feels wrong, tell me at once." "I will," he promised. Alistair drew a chair closer and sat beside them. He leaned in with quiet intensity. "Do it exactly as before," he murmured, "and take your time." Isla nodded. She warmed the cloth in the small basin beside the bed, wringing it slowly. Her fingers trembled, though she prayed neither boy nor father noticed. When she leaned forward and placed her hand under Ewan's chin, her voice stayed steady. "Close your eyes for me." He obeyed. She cleaned the eyelid carefully, the familiar sensation grounding her. Then she parted the soft skin with the gentlest pressure. Her breath caught. "There it is," she whispered. Alistair leaned closer, tense with expectation. "You can feel it again?" "Yes," Isla murmured. "It's very small, but it's there." Ewan asked quietly, "Is it the pebble?" "Yes, sweetheart," Isla said. "Would you like me to try to take it out?" "Will it hurt?" "No," she said honestly. "It may feel strange, but it won't hurt." Ewan nodded bravely. "All right." Alistair exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. "Proceed." Isla took a breath so deep she felt it reach her spine. She steadied her fingers and lifted the eyelid once more. Using the corner of the damp cloth, rolled tightly into a tiny point, she touched the spot where the hard speck pressed against the inner lid. She felt resistance at first, then the tiniest shift. She froze. Alistair's voice was low. "Did it move?" "Yes." She pressed again, softer this time. The object shifted under her touch, almost sliding along the inner curve of the lid. Isla's pulse hammered. She whispered to Ewan, "You're doing wonderfully, just keep still." He nodded, gripping her wrist lightly for comfort. With one more careful motion, Isla applied the faintest pressure and felt the object slide free. She gasped softly as it fell onto the cloth with a faint metallic tap. It was so small she almost missed it. Alistair leaned forward abruptly. "Is that—" Isla held the cloth steady, lifting the corner for him to see. A tiny shard, no larger than a grain of coarse sand, rested on the fabric. It glinted faintly in the dawn light. Ewan blinked rapidly. "Did you get it?" "Yes," Isla whispered, overwhelmed. "It's out." The boy blinked again, then again. Each blink seemed stronger, clearer. Then suddenly he reached for the air, confused. "Papa, why is the room bright?" Alistair froze. "Bright?" he echoed faintly. Ewan squinted, turning his head toward the window. "It's bright. Too bright." Isla clutched the cloth, her heart soaring and trembling all at once. "Ewan, can you see anything?" He rubbed his eyes lightly, then lowered his hand slowly. His breath hitched. I see. Shapes. And Papa. I think that's you. Alistair's eyes widened, full of raw disbelief. Ewan, he whispered. Look at me. I am. Ewan said softly. Alistair's face broke just for a moment, the weight of 6 years of sorrow cracking open. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched his son's cheek. You're looking at me, he murmured. Ewan giggled through sudden excitement. Your beard is bigger than I thought. A laugh, weak and stunned, escaped the prince. He pulled his son into a tight embrace, holding him as if afraid the moment would vanish if he let go. Isla turned away slightly, overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. This belonged to father and son. She stood quietly, the cloth still in her hand, watching in silence. After several long moments, Alistair pulled away, wiping his face with one hand. He turned to Isla, his expression full of shock, gratitude, and something deeper she couldn't name. You did this, he said. Isla shook her head quickly. No, Your Highness. Something simply came out. I don't know how it was missed before. That object, Alistair said, stepping toward her, was embedded in my son's eye since he was an infant. And now he can see. You did this. Isla hesitated, then whispered, I only removed what didn't belong. Alistair stared at her, as though trying to understand how someone so ordinary could have done something so extraordinary. He reached for the cloth with careful hands, lifting the tiny shard. This should be impossible, he said. Ewan, now fully awake and blinking at the room as though discovering a new world, pointed clumsily at Isla. I see you. You look like a person. Isla laughed, startled. What kind of person? A nice one, Ewan said proudly. Alistair closed his hand gently around the shard. Miss Cameron, we must understand how this happened. She nodded. Of course, Your Highness. He looked back at Ewan, who was still mesmerized by everything around him. First, we must ensure he's well. Isla stepped closer. Ewan, can you see clearly? The boy blinked several times. Yes, but the other eye feels prickly. Isla's smile faded. The other eye? Ewan rubbed the left one with the back of his hand. It feels like the same pebble, only deeper. Alistair raised his head sharply. You never mentioned this. I didn't think it mattered, Ewan said innocently. I thought everyone had pebbles in their eyes sometimes. Isla exchanged a tense look with the prince. This changes everything, Alistair said softly. Before they could speak further, a knock sounded at the door. It opened, and the senior nurse entered. Her eyes fell immediately on the scene, Ewan awake, alert, and staring back at her as though seeing her for the first time. The nurse froze. Your Highness! Ewan lifted a hand cheerfully. Good morning. Your hair is grey. The nurse's mouth fell open. He is looking at me. Alistair's voice grew firm. He is. She stumbled backward a step. But how? Isla stepped forward, choosing her words carefully. There was something in his eye. Something very small. The nurse's face turned pale. That is not possible. It happened, Alistair said sharply. With my own eyes I saw it. The nurse swallowed, shaken. Your Highness, if this is true, then someone must have— Not now, Alistair interrupted. We will discuss this later. Leave us. The nurse backed away, her face a storm of confusion and something that looked very much like fear. When she was gone, Isla knelt beside Ewan again. Does the other eye hurt? Only a little, he said. Alistair stepped closer, lowering his voice. Miss Cameron, if a shard like this was in one eye— Isla nodded slowly. Then another could have been placed in the other. Alistair's breath trembled with fury he fought to contain. Who would do such a thing? I don't know, Isla said softly, but this didn't happen by accident. Alistair looked down at the shard again, his expression hardening. This castle holds secrets, he said, and we must find the truth. Isla met his gaze, no longer afraid. Whatever you ask of me, Your Highness, I will help. He studied her for a long moment, something quietly resolute in his eyes. Then he murmured, We begin with the question no one dared ask. What question? Isla whispered. Alistair closed his hand around the tiny metallic speck. Who placed this inside my son's eye? The news travelled through Dunmore Castle faster than any servant could run. No one shouted it. No one dared announce it aloud. Yet it moved through hallways and kitchens like a breath turning into a wind. The prince's son had opened his eyes and seen a face. By breakfast, every chambermaid and footman knew, and every one of them pretended not to know whenever Prince Alistair entered the room. But Alistair had no interest in whispers. His attention stayed fixed on Isla, and the small boy now staring curiously at everything. The bedposts, the hearth, the folds of Isla's dress, the color of his father's coat. It should have been a morning of celebration, but instead there was a tension beneath every breath, a silent question stretching across the castle like a shadow. Who had placed the object in Ewan's eye? Ewan didn't seem to notice the atmosphere. He walked through his room in stumbling wonder, reaching toward things he'd only touched before. Isla followed like a quiet guardian, guiding his hand when he tripped over a rug or bumped into a chest. "Does the world look as you imagined it?" she asked gently. Ewan nodded, though his brows were knit in concentration. "Yes, but I thought everything would be bigger." Alistair laughed softly, though his mind was elsewhere. "You will find that many things appear smaller when you finally see them, lad." Ewan pointed toward the window. "What color is that outside?" "Grey," Alistair said. "A very Scottish grey." Ewan grinned. "I like it anyway." Isla smiled, though her thoughts were far from light. Every time she looked at the tiny metallic shard Alistair had placed inside a small velvet pouch, her stomach tightened. Someone had intentionally put that thing in a baby's eye. No accident could explain it. And now Ewan's other eye still bothered him. Isla whispered, "Your Highness, we should look at the other eye today. Carefully, but perhaps with a physician present, one you trust." Alistair hesitated. "I know just the man." Before he could explain, the door opened. The senior nurse stepped inside with a forced calm, her hands clasped too tightly. Her gaze flicked to Isla before lowering respectfully before the prince. "Your Highness, I came to inquire about the boy's condition. There are so many rumors circulating." Ewan, delighted by his new ability, waved at her. "I can see you, nurse. Your ribbon is crooked." The nurse's face paled. She touched the ribbon instinctively. "Is it indeed?" Alistair motioned for her to step farther into the room. "Yes, he can see, and now we must determine how this sight was kept from him for so long." A flicker of something, fear or guilt, passed across the nurse's eyes before she steadied herself. "Your Highness, I assure you I never saw anything amiss." "I believe you did not," Alistair said. "But someone did." The nurse swallowed. "May I ask how this sudden recovery occurred?" Isla felt the weight of the nurse's attention settle on her, but she remained quiet until Alistair spoke. "Miss Cameron removed a foreign object lodged inside Ewan's eyelid," he said plainly. "We believe there may be another." The nurse's hand flew to her mouth. "Another?" Ewan nodded. "My left eye feels prickly, like the other one did." The nurse stared at Isla with open fear now. "Miss Cameron, did you put anything—" "No," Alistair snapped. "She removed something. Something that should never have been there." Isla stood very still, her hands clasped before her. "Your Highness, if I may speak with the nurse alone." "No," Alistair said quickly. "No more secrecy. If you know anything, nurse, now is the time." The nurse shook her head, trembling. "I know nothing except that the boy's first physician was particular, too particular. He often dismissed my concerns. And after the princess passed, he became harder to speak to." She looked between Alistair and Isla with haunted eyes. "I never touched the infant's eyes except to clean them," she whispered. "I swear it." Alistair stepped forward. "Then tell me this. Why do the earliest medical records appear incomplete?" The nurse's breath caught. "Because someone removed them." "Who?" Alistair demanded. She hesitated too long. "Who?" he repeated louder. "I do not know his name," she said miserably, "only that he was sent by the council to review the health of the new heir. He arrived unannounced and left before the child could speak. He said the records contained private information and would be stored elsewhere." Alistair's face darkened. "No one informed me of this. I did not dare question him. He came with authority sealed in writing." Isla stepped forward quietly. "Do you know where he took the documents?" The nurse shook her head. "I never saw him again." Alistair closed his eyes briefly, as if holding back the urge to shout. When he opened them, determination had replaced shock. "Leave us," he told the nurse, "and until further notice you are not to speak of this to anyone." The nurse curtsied shakily and hurried away. When the door closed, Isla let out a long, trembling breath. "Your Highness, what does this mean?" "It means someone feared what Ewan might become," he said. "Feared his future, feared his sight." Ewan climbed onto the bed with clumsy enthusiasm. "Papa, look! I can see your boots." Alistair smiled gently at him. "Indeed you can, lad." But behind the smile, Isla saw something dark settle into his expression. He was no longer only a father. He was a man who had found a wrong done to his child and meant to uncover the truth behind it. A knock interrupted them again. This time it wasn't the nurse, it was Captain Fraser, head of the household guard. He bowed to Alistair. "Your Highness, you summoned me?" "Yes," Alistair said. "I need a rider sent immediately to the village. Summon Dr. McLaren. Tell him to come under utmost discretion." Fraser nodded and hurried off. Ewan tugged at Isla's sleeve. "Who is Dr. McLaren?" "He is someone your father trusts," Isla said warmly. "Someone who may help us understand what happened. Will he make my left eye normal too?" Isla's throat tightened. "We hope so." Alistair stepped close and lowered his voice so only Isla could hear. "When the doctor arrives, I want you by his side. You understand the sensation better than any of us." "Of course," Isla said, though her heart thudded with worry. "And, Isla," he added softly, surprising her, "whatever happens, know that what you did this morning is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Her breath faltered. "Your Highness, I only did what any caretaker would do." "No," he said. "Many saw him. Many tended to him. Only you looked." Their eyes held briefly, long enough for Isla's heart to flutter before she forced herself to look away. Later that morning, the castle staff began murmuring openly. Isla felt their gazes following her as she walked through the halls to fetch fresh cloths. Some looked fearful, some looked suspicious. A few looked strangely resentful, as if Ewan's sight upset the balance they'd grown accustomed to. One maid whispered to another, "If the boy sees, everything will change." Another answered, "Not everyone wants change." Isla pretended not to hear, but the words clung to her. When she returned to Ewan's room, the boy was sitting at the window, staring outside in awe. "Isla, there are trees. I knew they were there, but they look different. Tall and wiggly." She laughed softly. "Branches move with the wind. They look like they're dancing," he said. Alistair stood behind him, watching the scene with deep emotion. He looked at Isla. "I've decided," he said quietly. "Until we know more, Ewan must remain where only trusted people can reach him. I fear that whoever did this may not want their work undone." Isla nodded solemnly. "I feel the same." "You will stay with him," Alistair said. "Always." A small warmth filled Isla's chest. "I will." That afternoon, Dr. McLaren arrived, an older man with clear eyes and a steady, gentle manner. He examined Ewan with calm confidence while Isla remained at his side. "There is indeed something beneath the other eyelid," he said at last. "Just as Miss Cameron described." Alistair's hands clenched at his sides. "Can it be removed?" "Yes," Dr. McLaren said, "and easily. It is not embedded. It was placed." Placed. The word shook Isla to the core. Dr. McLaren prepared to remove it, but Ewan whimpered softly and reached for Isla. She knelt beside him immediately. "I'm here," she whispered. "Just breathe." Alistair knelt on the other side, holding the boy's hand. Dr. McLaren leaned in, working with quiet precision. Within moments he lifted the second shard into view, a twin to the first. Alistair stared at it, stunned all over again. So it is true. Both eyes. Ewan blinked rapidly. Then suddenly his gaze sharpened. He gasped. "I can see everything," he whispered. Alistair closed his eyes in gratitude. Isla felt tears prick her own. But before relief could settle, Dr. McLaren spoke in a somber tone. "These are not natural objects. Someone placed them intentionally, and recently enough that their marks remain faint." Alistair's face hardened. "Recently?" "Yes," the doctor said. "Not at birth. Not even in infancy." Isla's heart dropped. "Then who," Prince Alistair whispered, "has had access to my son's eyes all these years?" The room fell into a stunned silence that stretched so long, even young Ewan sensed the weight of it. He looked between the adults, confused by the stillness. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked softly. Alistair immediately pulled him close. "No, lad. None of this is your doing." Dr. McLaren held the second metallic shard in his palm, turning it under the light with a deeply troubled expression. "These were not placed in a newborn's eyes," he said again, more firmly now. "The tissue shows almost no sign of long-term irritation. At most, a few months." Isla felt a shiver travel up her spine. "Months?" "Yes," the doctor said. "They were placed when he was already a child, recently enough that the eye has not scarred around the foreign matter." Alistair's voice was quiet, but dangerously so. "Who has tended to him regularly since his infancy?" Isla hesitated, afraid to answer too quickly. The nurse, the attendants, herself, but she had only arrived days ago, and Ewan had already felt the prickling then. Dr. McLaren spoke again. "Whoever did this had access to the child's daily routines, someone whose presence around him caused no suspicion." Alistair's expression tightened. Isla could see the prince's thoughts racing, leaping from one memory to the next, piecing together years of routine, loyalty, trust. Ewan tugged on Isla's sleeve. "Can I go outside now? I want to see the courtyard." "Soon," Isla said, smoothing his hair. "We will go when it's safe." Alistair's voice sharpened. "Safe?" She looked at him, heart pounding. "Your Highness, if someone did this intentionally, they may not be pleased that it has been undone." Alistair inhaled slowly, his anger controlled but powerful. "No one will harm my son again." Dr. McLaren nodded. "You must consider who had the motive. If the boy's abilities were hidden, someone benefited from it." Alistair's gaze snapped toward the door, where muffled footsteps echoed in the hall. "Someone in this castle." Isla tried to think clearly. "The nurse has been here since Ewan's birth. The attendants rotate often." But she stayed. Dr. McLaren raised a hand gently. "Do not accuse lightly. Fear can distort judgment just as much as evidence." Isla nodded. "I'm not accusing, only observing." Alistair rubbed a hand over his face, weary. "I need clarity, not speculation." Ewan reached for his father's hand. "Papa, will I still have stories tonight?" The simplicity of the question softened Alistair's expression. He touched his son's cheek. "Yes, my boy. Every night." But when he looked at Isla, the softness disappeared. "We must speak privately. Please stay with Ewan while I arrange matters." She nodded. "Of course, Your Highness." When he and Dr. McLaren stepped out of the room, Isla settled beside Ewan on the floor, letting him examine a wooden carving with new eyes. He laughed at the crooked shape of the carved horse and marveled at how the light danced on polished stone. "Everything looks alive," he whispered. "It is," Isla said, "but you're seeing it with new wonder." Ewan looked up at her. "Thank you for helping me." Her heart tightened. "You helped yourself, Ewan. You were brave." He leaned against her shoulder, comfortable and content. Isla held him gently, but her mind churned. Who had placed the shards? And why? If someone feared the child's sight, what did they fear he might one day see? Moments later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Isla looked up as the senior nurse stepped in. She hesitated before closing the door behind her. Her expression was strained, but her voice was calm. "Miss Cameron, may I speak with you?" Isla bristled, instinctively shifting closer to Ewan. "If there is something to say, you may say it here." The nurse's gaze flickered to Ewan, then back to Isla. "Very well. I came to tell you that I understand why you distrust me, but I assure you I had no involvement in this matter." Isla held her voice steady. "Then why were you so dismissive before?" The nurse's cheeks reddened. "Because I feared losing the prince's confidence. I have served this family for decades. When you arrived, things changed, and now everything has changed." Her voice trembled. "You don't know what it is like to be replaced." Isla softened, if only slightly. "This isn't about positions or pride. It's about Ewan." "I know," the nurse whispered, "which is why you must be careful. Someone else in this castle had access to the boy, someone with far more freedom than I." "Who?" Isla pressed. The nurse hesitated. "I do not know. But the prince's advisors, the council representatives, the men who visited after the princess's passing, they carried influence that overshadowed any protest I might make." "Do you know their names?" "Only one," the nurse said. "A man called Hawthorne. He came with a sealed letter. He claimed authority from the council." Isla felt a chill. Did he examine Ewan? Yes, the nurse said. Twice. What did he do? He said he was ensuring the child's well-being, but he checked the boy's eyes meticulously. Too meticulously. When I questioned him, he reminded me I had no right to doubt him. Isla's stomach twisted. How long ago was this? Nearly a year, the nurse said. Isla froze. A year. The exact time frame Dr. McLaren estimated. Before she could reply, footsteps approached rapidly. The nurse stiffened. Prince Alistair entered, followed by Captain Fraser. Alistair's voice was controlled but stern. Nurse, I did not summon you. I came to speak with Miss Cameron, the nurse replied. I wish to clear any misunderstanding. Fraser stepped toward her. You are needed elsewhere. The nurse bowed. Yes, Captain. She left quietly, though her eyes lingered on Isla, with a mixture of regret and warning. When the door shut, Alistair turned to Isla. What did she want? She told me about a man named Hawthorne, Isla said. He examined Ewan twice last year. Alistair froze. Hawthorne, he repeated slowly. I remember the name. Captain Fraser stepped forward. Your Highness, I recall him as well. A quiet man. He arrived with a letter sealed by the council. Dr. McLaren re-entered at that moment. If that man examined the boy, then we may have our culprit. Ewan looked up. What's a culprit? Isla touched his hair. Someone who made a mistake, she said softly. A very wrong mistake. Fraser turned to the prince. Shall I send riders to locate this Hawthorne? No, Alistair said firmly. Not yet. First we must ensure the castle is secure. Then we increase the guard on the prince's chambers, Fraser said. And on Miss Cameron, Alistair added quietly. Isla blinked. Me? You were the one who discovered the truth, Alistair said. And if someone benefited from Ewan's blindness, they may not appreciate your intervention. Isla felt her pulse spike. I didn't think about that. I have, Alistair said. And I will not risk your safety. Ewan slipped his hand into Isla's. I don't want anything bad to happen to her. Nothing will, Alistair said. Dr. McLaren stepped forward. Your Highness, with respect, we must act carefully. If someone infiltrated the castle under false authority, they may have allies. We must investigate discreetly. Alistair nodded. Agreed. He looked at Isla again. There was a softness in his eyes now, a quiet protectiveness that unsettled and warmed her at once. You will stay with Ewan at all times, he said, until we know more. I will, she replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. And if anything at all, seems strange or out of place, you come to me first. I promise, she said. The prince's tension eased ever so slightly. Very well, Alistair said to Fraser. Increase the guard, and find all records of this Hawthorne, every note, every signature, every trace. Fraser nodded. At once. When he left, the room felt quieter but heavier. Ewan looked up at Isla with innocent excitement. Can we go outside now? Soon, Ewan, Isla said softly. Very soon. Alistair exhaled. First, we must uncover the missing part of this puzzle. If these shards were placed only months ago, Dr. McLaren nodded grimly. Then the one who placed them may still be inside these walls. At that moment, something slid under the door, so quietly even the adults almost missed it. A small, folded note. Alistair strode forward and picked it up. Isla watched his face as he opened it. His eyes darkened. He handed the note to Isla without a word. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. Only 5 words were written inside. You should have left him blind. The note felt heavier than parchment should ever feel. Isla stared at the 5 words, reading them again and again until they blurred. You should have left him blind. Her hands shook as she passed it back to Prince Alistair, who folded it with a slow, controlled motion. His face showed no fury, no alarm, only a stillness far more frightening. Ewan, unaware of the tension in the room, tugged at Isla's sleeve. Why do you look sad? He asked. She forced a small smile. It's nothing for you to worry about. But Alistair knelt beside his son and spoke gently. Ewan, lad, I need you to stay close to Isla today. Promise me. Ewan nodded, though his voice held uncertainty. I promise. Captain Fraser returned a moment later, summoned by a guard who had seen the note slip under the door. Alistair handed it to him without a word. Fraser read it, his brow furrowing deeply. This was not a careless threat, Fraser murmured. Someone knew exactly when to approach this door and how to vanish. Alistair straightened. Increase the watch on this entire wing. No one enters without written permission. Yes, Your Highness. When Fraser left, Isla realized she had been gripping the armrest so tightly her fingers ached. Alistair noticed and moved toward her. You must not blame yourself, he said quietly. I told you to trust me, Isla whispered. I thought everything would be simpler once Ewan could see. His voice softened. You gave my son his sight. Whoever wrote this fears what he now sees. Isla glanced at the door as footsteps echoed past. I don't understand how anyone could wish harm on a child. Power often blinds more than darkness, Alistair said. Ewan reached for Isla's hand again. Are we going to stay here all day? Isla looked at the prince uncertainly. Alistair exhaled. No, lad. You may go to the courtyard, with Isla beside you, and with guards at every entrance. Ewan brightened immediately. Can I run? Alistair almost smiled. Yes. But stay where she can see you. Minutes later, Isla guided Ewan through the castle's side corridor, escorted by 2 guards. The narrow hallway smelled faintly of dust and old tapestries. Ewan pointed at everything with a mixture of awe and mischief. Is that a dragon? He asked, pointing to the tapestry depicting a worn creature with wings. It's meant to be, Isla said. But he looks rather tired to me. Ewan giggled. He needs a nap. As they walked, voices drifted from the servants who pretended to busy themselves with polishing vases or sweeping floors. Whenever Isla passed, their whispers quieted instantly. She felt their unease, the way their eyes followed Ewan's every step now that he no longer walked blindly. At the bottom of the staircase, the side door to the courtyard stood open. A fresh breeze swept in. Ewan gasped at the brightness and hurried out with Isla close behind. The courtyard looked new to him. Sunlight on stone, swaying trees, the fountain he had only heard, but never seen. He dashed toward it with joyful astonishment. Isla, he called. The water's moving. She followed, smiling despite the unease that still clung to her. It always does, that's how fountains work. Ewan reached into the water, splashing gently. It's cold. 2 guards stayed several steps behind, eyes scanning the courtyard. Isla caught one of their glances and instinctively stepped between Ewan and the castle wall. Is something wrong? She asked quietly. Just keeping watch, Miss Cameron, the guard replied. Has anything unusual been reported? She asked. He hesitated. Only whispers, nothing solid. That did little to calm her. Ewan moved on to admire the trees. He traced the rough bark with his fingers, marveling at how it felt different from how it looked. Isla stayed close, keeping her senses sharp. She's worried again, Ewan said suddenly, turning to look directly at her. The clarity of his gaze startled her. She had grown so used to the soft blankness of his blind expression that the directness now felt almost overwhelming. She knelt beside him. I'm just being careful. Is something bad going to happen? He asked. Not if we can help it, Isla said honestly. Ewan wrapped his arms around her. Then stay close. She hugged him back, feeling the urgency behind his small arms. Moments later, the courtyard door opened again. Captain Fraser entered briskly, scanning for Isla. Miss Cameron, he called softly, His Highness requests you return Ewan to his chamber. Immediately. Why? She asked. There have been developments. Ewan looked from Fraser to Isla. Do I have to go back inside already? I'm afraid so, lad, Fraser said gently. Just for a while. Ewan pouted, but obeyed. Isla took his hand and led him back toward the castle. The guards followed, forming a protective triangle around them. Once inside, the corridors felt darker. 10 steps in, a maid rushed past them, clutching a stack of linens, her face unusually pale. She dropped one as she passed and didn't turn back to pick it up. Something was wrong. When Isla and Ewan reached his chamber, Alistair was waiting with Dr. McLaren. Both looked troubled. What happened? Isla asked. Alistair motioned for her to close the door. She did. A guard reported seeing a stranger near the western wing, Alistair said quietly. A man whose description matches Hawthorne's. Isla's breath caught. Here. Today. Yes, Alistair said. Not an hour ago. Dr. McLaren added, and he fled before anyone could speak to him. Ewan shrank behind Isla, sensing the worry. Why would someone run? Alistair crouched to meet his eyes. Because some people do things they should not. But you are safe, and we will keep you safe. Ewan nodded, though fear flickered in his expression. Isla placed a hand on his shoulder. Come sit by the fire. I'll tell you a story. Alistair rose and stepped aside, watching her with a mixture of gratitude and fierce protectiveness. Ewan settled onto the rug, while Isla began telling a tale about a fisherman who chased the wind. Her voice softened the room's edges, drawing calm from the boys' worried breaths. But Alistair was not at ease. While Ewan listened, he pulled Dr. McLaren aside. Are you certain the shards were placed recently? He whispered. Beyond doubt, the doctor said. 6 months, a year at most. Alistair's jaw tightened. And someone entered the castle today. Someone who knows the passages, the doctor said. Alistair stared at the door as though expecting it to open again. He will not touch my son. I will see to that. When the story ended, Ewan climbed into bed for a rest. Isla pulled the blanket over him gently, brushing hair from his forehead. Stay with me, he whispered. I will, she said. She sat beside him until his eyes closed. Once he slept, Isla rose quietly, stepping toward Alistair. What now? She asked. Alistair opened the pouch containing the shards and stared at them as though they were pieces of a nightmare. Now we find out why Hawthorne returned, and what he intends. Isla hesitated. Do you think he came because Ewan can see again? I think he came because someone told him. A chill ran down her spine. Someone inside the castle. Exactly. Dr. McLaren cleared his throat. There is something else, Your Highness, something I noticed while examining the second shard. Alistair turned sharply. What? It bears markings, the doctor said. Small, deliberate markings, as if part of a larger mechanism. Isla's eyes widened. A mechanism. Yes, these shards were crafted, not found, not improvised. Alistair's expression darkened. What kind of man crafts blindness? Dr. McLaren hesitated before answering. A man who fears the future. Isla felt an icy realization forming. Your Highness, if Hawthorne did this under orders, then he may not be working alone. Alistair nodded slowly. Then someone beyond this castle has reason to fear my son. And before Isla could reply, a sudden knock sounded at the chamber door. 3 sharp, urgent strikes that made every muscle in the room tense. Captain Fraser's voice came through the door, breathless. Your Highness, Hawthorne has been found, and he claims he came to meet with Miss Cameron. The room froze around Isla. Her breath caught, and for a moment she could not tell if she had misheard. Meet with Miss Cameron? The words sounded impossible, ridiculous, terrifying. Alistair stepped toward the door at once. Fraser, repeat that. Captain Fraser's voice came through the wood, tense and unmistakably urgent. Your Highness, the man we believe to be Hawthorne is in custody. He offered no resistance. He asked only to speak with Miss Cameron, no one else. Isla felt cold wash over her, as if the walls themselves had darkened. Alistair turned to her. You have never met this man? Never, she whispered. Thought about him? Heard his name before arriving here? No. Has he contacted you in any way? Of course not, Isla breathed. Why would he want to speak to me? Ewan stirred in his half-sleep. Isla rushed to his side, brushing his hair to calm him. She needed the grounding, needed something innocent to hold on to while the world twisted into shapes she did not recognize. He speaks your name, Fraser added from behind the door, clearly and calmly. Bring me Miss Cameron. Those were his words. Alistair's jaw tightened. No one speaks to her without my consent, not even under guard. Isla stepped forward. Her voice shook, but only slightly. Your Highness, if he knows something that will explain why he hurt Ewan, I cannot just hide. You will not face him alone, Alistair said, and you will only face him if I determine it's safe. She nodded, though fear pressed against her ribs. Bring him to the west antechamber, Alistair ordered through the door. Keep him under full guard. Touch him if he so much as breathes incorrectly. Yes, Your Highness, Fraser replied, and footsteps thundered away. Isla turned back to Ewan, who slept quietly despite the tension buzzing through the chamber. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to still her heartbeat. Alistair approached her. His voice softened just enough to reach her through the dread. "Isla, look at me." She lifted her eyes. "You have done nothing wrong. Whatever this man wants, it is not your burden alone. You will not face him without me." She nodded again, slower this time. "I trust you, Your Highness." The words left her mouth before she could second-guess them. He held her gaze longer than propriety allowed, but neither of them looked away. Dr. McLaren cleared his throat gently. "If Hawthorne intends to intimidate her, it may be an attempt to destabilize the one person who truly saw through the deception." Isla whispered. "But why me?" "Because you removed what he placed," Alistair said. That simple sentence struck her with a chill deeper than winter. Minutes later, Isla walked through the corridors beside Alistair, flanked by 2 guards. Dr. McLaren went ahead to prepare the room. Every servant they passed stiffened, quieting their whispers as the prince strode by. Isla felt their glances prick her skin like thorns, and every one of them carried the same question. Why is the prince escorting the nanny like a shield? The west antechamber was cold, empty except for a table, 2 sturdy chairs, and the faint smell of disuse. It was a private room, tucked near the old storage vaults, rarely visited, rarely lit. And standing in the center, hands bound, watched by 4 guards, was Hawthorne. He was not what Isla expected, not monstrous, not intimidating. A thin, pale man with silver-streaked hair and hollow cheeks, as though illness or worry had carved them. His eyes, however, were sharp, far too sharp. The moment Isla entered, he looked directly at her, ignoring the prince entirely. "So," Hawthorne said quietly, "you are Isla Cameron." She stiffened. "And you are Hawthorne." "Yes." He studied her with unsettling focus. "You did well." Alistair stepped forward between them. "Choose your words carefully. Every breath you take happens because I allow it." Hawthorne barely blinked, a father's fury. "Understandable." Alistair's expression hardened. "Why did you request her?" "Speak." Hawthorne tilted his head, as though listening to a distant sound only he could hear. "Because she sees what others overlook." Isla felt a jolt of confusion. "What do you know of me? I've never met you." "Oh, you've never met me," Hawthorne agreed calmly. "But I've heard of you. The girl who pays attention, the girl who asks questions, the girl the village midwife called unsettlingly perceptive." Isla's stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" "Because I make a habit of knowing the people who interfere with delicate matters." Alistair's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You placed those objects in my son's eyes." Hawthorne's calm expression didn't shift. "I did." The guards tensed, but Hawthorne didn't flinch. Alistair's hands curled into fists. "Why?" "Because," Hawthorne said, "a blind heir cannot ignite a war." Isla felt the floor tilt beneath her. "A war?" she whispered. Hawthorne nodded. "The council feared the alliances forming around Dunmore. They feared the growing strength of this land. A strong prince, a clear-eyed heir, would threaten delicate balance. I was sent to ensure weakness." Alistair stepped closer, fury simmering beneath every muscle. "You harmed my son to prevent political strength?" "You were becoming too powerful," Hawthorne said simply. "Your influence stretched far, too far, and a seeing heir would cement that power." Isla covered her mouth. "So you blinded a child?" Hawthorne's gaze shifted to her again. "A small sacrifice. For peace. A cruelty," she whispered. "A necessity," he said. Alistair's voice rose, not in a shout, but in a quiet, deadly way. "And now, why have you returned?" Hawthorne smiled faintly. "Because someone told me the shards were removed." Isla felt her chest constrict. "You have a messenger inside the castle," Alistair said. Hawthorne nodded. Several. Isla stepped back unconsciously, heart pounding so loudly she feared everyone could hear it. "And they told you another detail," Hawthorne said softly. "That the one who removed them was her." Isla froze. Hawthorne gestured slightly with bound hands. "I wanted to see the girl who broke the council's restraint, the one with enough instinct to find what no physician could." Alistair moved instantly, placing himself fully between Isla and the prisoner. "You will not speak to her again." Hawthorne ignored him. His eyes stayed fixed on her, full of unnerving certainty. "You must leave," Hawthorne said. "Leave this castle. Leave now. Or you will not survive what the council plans next." Isla's voice trembled. "Why warn me?" "Because I admire you," he said softly. "You did what none of us expected. You changed the future." Dr. McLaren stepped between them, startled by Hawthorne's tone. "This is madness." Hawthorne shook his head slowly. "It is truth. Miss Cameron, you must flee before nightfall." Alistair's fury scorched through the room. "She is under my protection." "No," Hawthorne said quietly. "She is in danger precisely because of your protection. The council will not forgive her for restoring the boy's sight." Isla's breath trembled. "You're lying." Hawthorne leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not lying. Warning. They will not stop at one threat. They will not stop until you disappear. From Dunmore, from Scotland, perhaps from this world altogether." Alistair took a step closer, but Hawthorne finished his warning without fear. "You cannot save her, Prince. They know who she is now. They know what she can see." Isla felt the chill of his words deep inside her bones. Her hands trembled, her breath caught. Alistair turned slowly toward her, and in his eyes she saw fear, not for himself, but for her. Hawthorne murmured, "Run, Isla Cameron, before the council comes for you." The guards moved forward to silence him, but Hawthorne raised his voice in one sharp final warning. "They are already inside the castle." Alistair did not shout when Hawthorne delivered his last warning. He did not lunge or curse or demand names. Instead, he grew impossibly still, as if motion itself would give power to the threat lingering in the air. The guards seized Hawthorne, dragging him back from Isla, but the man barely resisted. His eyes stayed on her until the door shut behind him. Isla stood frozen, her pulse echoing in her fingertips. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Alistair stepped toward her. "Isla," he said gently. "Breathe." She obeyed only because he said it. Her lungs filled slowly, shakily, like she had forgotten how breathing worked. Dr. McLaren cleared his throat. "Your Highness, what shall be done with Hawthorne now?" "Confinement," Alistair said. "Under guard, day and night." "And the council?" McLaren pressed. "I will send no message until I know precisely what their role was," Alistair replied. Isla swallowed hard. "Your Highness, he said they were already inside the castle." Alistair placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "We will verify every name, every record, every visitor in the past year. No servant, no advisor will move without my knowledge." She nodded, though fear still clung to her. A guard burst into the room. "Your Highness, the West Gatekeeper confirms no one left the grounds in the last 2 hours." Alistair's grip tightened. Then Hawthorne spoke the truth. "Whoever aided him is still here." Isla's knees weakened, but she kept her composure. "What do we do now?" Alistair looked at her, his gaze steady and resolute. "We end this. All of it. Today." He escorted Isla back to Ewan's chamber, with more guards than she'd ever seen in one hallway. Dr. McLaren examined the boy a final time, ensuring both eyes were healing properly. Ewan blinked up at them, confused by the sudden intensity around him. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. Alistair knelt. "No, lad. We're simply being careful. I don't like everyone looking serious." "You won't have to for much longer," Alistair promised. When Ewan fell asleep for his afternoon rest, Alistair motioned Isla to the far corner of the room. "I've decided," he said quietly. "We will not run. Not you. Not Ewan." Hawthorne used fear as a weapon. "I refuse to let fear rule this household," Isla whispered. "But if the council ordered this—" "We don't know that for certain," Alistair interrupted. "I need facts, not threats. And I need to know who inside these walls betrayed us." Isla looked toward the door. "Do you suspect someone?" "Yes." His voice was low. "But I will not speak names without proof. The wrong accusation could destroy lives." She admired him in that moment, his restraint, his clarity, the strength he fought to maintain for his son's sake. A man of power who refused cruelty. It made her chest warm in a way she couldn't admit aloud. "What can I do to help?" she asked. "You already helped," he said softly. "More than anyone else." She lowered her gaze, humbled. Alistair continued, "Now it falls to me to protect what you restored." For the rest of the afternoon, the castle buzzed with controlled urgency. Captains checked entry logs. Servants were questioned about unfamiliar faces. The archives were opened under supervision, No one was accused, but no one was above suspicion. Doors that had been open for years were suddenly closed, guarded, locked. Isla remained with Ewan, telling stories and helping him rediscover the world he'd never seen. He marveled at shadows, laughed at the crooked legs of a wooden stool, counted the stitches on his quilt with wide-eyed fascination. "You're learning so fast," Isla whispered, as he traced the carved lace on the mantel. "You're seeing everything with fresh eyes." He turned toward her. "Because you helped me." His words warmed something deep inside her. She brushed his hair from his forehead and smiled. As evening approached, Alistair returned. His face looked tired but not defeated. "It's done," he said. Isla rose from her chair. "What have you discovered?" "That Hawthorne did not act under council orders," Alistair replied. "At least, none that can be traced. The seal he used was authentic, but he departed the council's service last winter. Quietly, without reason." "Then who was he working for?" Isla asked. "No one," Alistair said softly. "He acted alone." Isla blinked. "Alone?" McLaren entered behind him. "It seems Hawthorne grew obsessed with preventing conflict, a misguided scholar who feared the rising influence of Dunmore. His acts were not the will of many, just the will of one man convinced he served a greater peace." Isla sank into her seat. "So the council Ife had no hand." "That is my conclusion," Alistair said. "And my hope." Relief washed over her, slow but certain. "And his accomplices?" she asked. "There were none," Alistair answered. "Only servants he misled. He told them he was sent to protect Ewan's health. He used authority to silence doubt." "So the castle is safe," Isla whispered. Alistair nodded once. "Yes. The threat is gone." She let out a breath she had held since the morning. Ewan ran to the prince with bright, trusting eyes. "Papa, can we eat dinner together tonight?" Alistair swept him into a warm embrace. "Aye, lad, we will feast like kings." Ewan giggled. "Can Isla sit with us?" Alistair met Isla's gaze and nodded. "Of course she will." And for the first time since the shards were removed, the castle felt truly at peace. Later that night, after Ewan was safely tucked in bed, Isla stepped onto the small balcony outside the corridor. The sky was a deep cobalt, dotted with stars. The wind brushed her hair gently, as though welcoming her to breathe freely again. Alistair joined her quietly. "You looked troubled," he said. "I was only thinking," she replied, "about how quickly life can change." He leaned against the stone railing beside her. "Too quickly sometimes." They stood together in the cool night, watching the stars shimmer above Dunmore. The castle felt different now, lighter, freer, yet Isla still sensed a tenderness within her chest that had nothing to do with danger or fear. "You saved my son," Alistair said suddenly, breaking the long silence. She turned to him. "He saved himself. He had courage." "You had more," he said, "and I will never forget that." Her breath trembled, not from fear this time, but from something softer, deeper. "Your Highness," she murmured, "I am only a nanny." He shook his head. "You are far more than that." Isla looked away, her heart unsteady. Alistair continued, voice warm with sincerity. "You brought light back to this place. Back to Ewan. Back to me." She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "Thank you," she whispered. He did not touch her. He did not step closer. Yet she felt surrounded by his presence, his gratitude, his quiet affection. The danger had passed. The secrets were over. The castle was safe again. What remained was something gentler, something still unspoken, but unmistakably there between them. And as they stood beneath the starlit sky, the tension that had once filled the castle melted away, leaving room only for peace, gratitude, and the quiet beginning of something that felt very much like hope. The following morning rose with a gentleness Dunmore Castle had forgotten it could hold. No tension curled through the halls. No whispers followed Isla as she walked with Ewan to the sunlit corridor. No shadow of Hawthorne or secret accomplice trailed behind her steps. The storm had passed, and what remained was the quiet calm of a place learning to breathe again. Ewan ran ahead, eager to point out each thing he now saw with sharper clarity than the day before. "Isla, look! The big window makes the floor glow like gold." She smiled, her heart swelling. "You notice everything, Ewan." "It's because seeing is fun," he said proudly. Alistair approached from the opposite end of the corridor, dressed formally for the first time since the ordeal began. Something in his presence felt different, lighter, unburdened. He slowed when he saw them, the corners of his mouth lifting at the sight of his son racing toward him. Ewan collided into his father's legs with unrestrained joy. "Papa, the courtyard is so pretty this morning. Isla said we can walk there after breakfast." "And Isla speaks wisely," Alistair replied. His voice softened. "Good morning, Miss Cameron." "Good morning, Your Highness." He studied her a moment longer than courtesy demanded. "You slept?" "Yes," she admitted, for the first time in days. "Then I am grateful," he said. There was such sincerity in his tone that Isla felt a warmth rise to her cheeks. She looked away quickly, but Ewan noticed everything now, even the color in her face. "Papa," he said, pulling on Alistair's sleeve. "I think Isla looks happy." Alistair's gaze lingered on her. "So she does." Breakfast was lively, filled with Ewan's constant chatter and the occasional amused glance between father and Nanny. When they finished, Ewan hurried outside with 2 guards trailing him, giving them a brief moment alone in the dining hall. Alistair turned to Isla. "Walk with me." Her pulse fluttered. "Of course, Your Highness." He offered his arm, not as a formality, but with something warmer. Isla hesitated only a moment before taking it. Together they walked through the castle's inner corridor, where morning sun spilled across stone and tapestries fluttered softly in the breeze. "The worst is behind us," Alistair said quietly. "But in the quiet after danger, one question remains unanswered." Isla looked at him. "Which question?" He stopped walking, turning toward her fully. His voice lowered. "What path will you choose now?" She blinked, unprepared. "My path?" "Yes," he said. "Will you remain here at Dunmore, or return to your village?" The question struck her deeply. She had avoided thinking of it. I came here only to care for Ewan," she said softly. "I never imagined staying for longer than needed." Alistair's jaw tensed as if fighting back words. That was before the danger, before Ewan's sight returned, before the quiet glances and the closeness they now shared. Isla lowered her voice. "The castle is not my world, Your Highness." He stepped closer. "It could be." She couldn't breathe for a moment. "Alistair," she said quietly, using his name for the first time without realizing it. His eyes softened. "Say it again." She shook her head, flustered. "I shouldn't." "You should," he murmured, "because nothing has ever sounded so right." Her heart thudded painfully. She stepped back a fraction, though her body leaned toward him in betrayal. "You mustn't say such things." "Why not?" "Because it is not proper," she whispered. "Because I am no one. Because I—" He cut in softly, but firmly. "You are the woman who saved my son. That doesn't make me worthy of—" "No," he said. "You misunderstand. Your worth was never measured by rank." Isla looked toward the window, breath shaky. Even if such feelings existed, they cannot lead anywhere. You are a prince, and I am a man," he said simply. "A man whose heart has found its rest in your presence." Her eyes glistened. "Alistair." He stepped close enough that she felt the warmth of him, though he did not touch her. "I have spent years carrying a weight that nearly broke me, years believing I must face the world alone. But you came here without intention or ambition and brought light back into my life." She felt tears tremble along her lashes. "I only wanted to help your son, and in doing so," he whispered, "you have healed far more than his sight." She looked down, fighting the tide of feeling rising inside her. "You shouldn't say such things unless you mean them." "I do," he said. Ewan's laughter echoed from the courtyard, and Alistair stepped back slightly, as though remembering himself. "Come, he is waiting." They went outside together, joining Ewan as he attempted to count every leaf on a nearby tree. The day unfolded with calm wonder, Ewan exploring the gardens, McLaren paying a pleasant visit, the guards relaxing now that the danger had passed. Hours later, as the sun began to set, Isla returned Ewan to his chamber for the night. He hugged her tightly. "Will you tell me a story tomorrow?" he asked. "Every day," she promised. "Then stay here," he said simply, as if it were the easiest request in the world. "Stay with us." Isla blinked against the sting behind her eyes. "Good night, Ewan." He smiled sleepily. "Good night, Isla." When she stepped into the hallway, Alistair stood waiting for her as though he knew she would need him. He walked beside her in silence until they reached the balcony overlooking the misty hills. The world smelled of fresh earth and distant rain. Isla leaned on the railing. "He is happy again, because of you," Alistair said quietly. A gentle breeze brushed past them. "Earlier," Isla said, voice wavering, "you asked what path I will choose." "I remember." She clutched the railing. "I am afraid." He stepped closer. "Of what?" "That I will choose wrongly," she whispered. "That I will break my heart by choosing what I can never truly have." Alistair's voice dropped to a deep softness. "You speak as though you believe yourself unworthy." "I'm a simple woman from a village," she whispered. "I have no title, no dowry, no status." "You have courage," he said, "kindness, strength, and a spirit that does not yield." She shook her head. "That is not enough to stand beside a prince." Alistair's breath warmed her cheek as he leaned closer. "It is enough to stand beside me." Her lips parted, breath trembling. "I do not want duty," he murmured. "I do not want alliances or arrangements or titles." He lifted her chin with a touch so gentle it made her knees weaken. "I want you." Isla's breath hitched as his gaze fell into hers. "Alistair," he brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, "you are the woman who brought sight back to my son. And you are the woman who brought life back to me. I cannot imagine this castle without you. I will not." Her heart beat so loudly she feared he could hear it. She whispered, "If I stay, it will not be as a servant." "No," he said, "it will not." "Then in what place would I stay?" she asked breathlessly. He answered with soft certainty, "At my side, as my equal, as the woman I asked to share my life." She trembled. His sincerity was overwhelming. His nearness, his warmth, the tenderness in his eyes. Everything she had tried to push away now drew her in with undeniable force. "And Ewan?" she whispered. "He loves you already," Alistair said. "As I do." Those last 3 words fell between them like a quiet miracle. Isla's breath caught. "You love me?" "Yes," he said simply. "More than I knew I could love again." Her eyes welled with tears. "And if I asked you," he continued, his voice shaking slightly for the first time, "to stay in Dunmore Castle, not as a servant, but as my chosen companion, would you?" She stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. "Yes." Emotion swept across his face. Relief, joy, tenderness, he no longer bothered to hide. He reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "Then marry me," he whispered. Her eyes widened, tears spilling. "Alistair." "Say yes," he murmured. "Not for duty, not for the castle, for us." Isla lifted her free hand to his cheek, her voice trembling. "Yes, with all my heart." He pulled her gently into his arms, not with urgency, not with restraint, simply with the overwhelming need to hold the woman he loved. She fell against him with a soft gasp, feeling the strength in his embrace and the warmth she had long denied herself. When he finally drew back, he pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. "We will tell Ewan tomorrow." She smiled through her tears. "He will shout so loudly the whole castle will hear." "Then let them," Alistair said. Isla laughed softly, brushing her fingers along his jaw. He leaned in, lowering his forehead to hers, and for a moment the world disappeared. Only their breaths mingled, warm and close, hearts echoing the same rhythm. A love neither of them had sought had blossomed, bright and certain in the ruins of fear. Alistair whispered, "You brought light where there was darkness, hope where there was sorrow, and love where there was none." Isla answered with the truth she had been too afraid to speak until now. "And you," she whispered, "brought me home." His arms tightened around her, holding her as if he had searched for her all his life. And beneath the deepening night sky, with Dunmore Castle standing silent guard around them, Isla Cameron felt the warmth of her future settle unmistakably, irrevocably into place. A future bound by love, a future shared, a future about to begin when the prince leaned forward, breath warm against her lips, and finally kissed her. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.